Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Let's Process That podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Emily Christopher.
And I'm Nick Connerkamp.
And we are so glad that you have joined us today for another discussion, another chat, another processing. And we are going to be talking about a subject that Nick and I both have had quite a bit of experience in, and that is mentorship. But we're going to explore multiple sides of mentorship. That there's one particular that I was telling Nick, I've never heard anyone talk about this really, like on a platform. I've never heard somebody have the conversation that I think we might be diving into towards the end of the podcast. So I'm going to toss it to you, Nick, and you start us off.
So I won't give them the punchline, but let's just go ahead and talk about how to get a mentor. You and I have had conversations about adding people to our lives. Mm-hmm. I think mentors are important. Let me lay some framework before you and I get into the juicy subject, which caused us to even pick this subject. One of the most epic moments of my life, and I've probably said it on this podcast, if you've been part of my life, you've heard me talk about this. It was a pivotal moment in my life. You have to understand that I grew up with a couple different fathers. I grew up with a man the first 11 years of my life that was not my father. My real father came into my life at 11 years old. And so maybe with that as a backdrop, this story has more weight to me than it does to somebody else. There was a radio personality called Dr. Laura Schlesinger, and she was the original shock jock. I mean, she would just cut you to the knees, leave you bleeding. And we couldn't help but turn back on the next day to find out who was going to be left for dead. You know, she took no prisoners, cut no slack. And so one day a woman called in and the woman said, hey, my father is just not what I need him to be. I need more from a father. And this was a grown woman. And Dr. Laura asked her, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your father? She said a 3. And said, well, when you were growing up, what was he? A 3. So your whole life he's been a 3. Yes. And now you suddenly want him to be a 7. Who's the fool now? And she said, he is never going to be a 7. He's only ever been a 3. If you need a 7, you need to add more fathers to your life. That one story changed the course of my life. Wow. Because I realized that I did not have the things I needed. And if I was going to get those things, I needed to add that through other fathers and or mentors. Mm-hmm. And just real quick, I want to define that a little bit. For me, a father is speaking to my life, how I conduct myself, my character, the decisions I'm making. A father figure speaks to my life. A mentor usually speaks to my career, a skill set. Think about a mom who has her first baby and she's looking for a mentor to teach her how to do, raise a child. What's what helps a child grow up and be successful. And so I think that it's easier for people to get their heads around finding a mentor than it is finding a father figure. Mm-hmm. And for me, unfortunately, because I was always on unsteady ground, I was open to both. I was like, hey, I need more fathers. I remember there was a year that I sent out 4 Father's Day cards. I just had 4 of them that I had to send out love to and say thank you for your investment in my life. Yeah. But I've added many mentors in my life that could teach me a skill, to help me with my career, that could help me through a season of my life. And so I've always been one that believed in surrounding myself with mentors. And it's of no, coincidence that both of my sons have mentors in their life. And they've added people to their life that can speak into their life and speak into their careers and some of their skill sets. So first of all, I believe so much in mentors. And if you're sitting there today and you're like, I have a regular ongoing problem that I don't know how to solve, maybe you need to add some people to your life. Maybe you need I call it Team Nick. Who's on Team Nick? And there's different roles on Team Nick, but I've usually got 1 or 2 mentors sitting there. And first of all, for anybody that's listening today that does not have a mentor, man, you're missing out. There's so many lessons that they can share with you that you don't even know is a problem. And so I'm all about adding mentors to our life, maybe defining what they speak to. Maybe they don't speak to your whole life. Maybe they speak to a part of it. But I'm all about adding some mentors, and I've always had one. I think they're important. I know you've had mentors. Let's just unpack that a little bit. The need for mentors.
Absolutely. So I think it's very important, even if you've had great parents, like I have great parents, there's still something about having other people speak into your life, be able to give you wisdom, guidance, um, and support, really. And so for me, I know that's always been essential, even when I wasn't like cognizantly aware of it. I'm thinking back to like early high school, like my voice teacher was somebody who that was her expertise. She spoke into me for music, and that was the role she played. And she was able to give me so much guidance about how to audition for college, how to get into a school of music, how to prepare, how to be disciplined. So, and again, that was like the first time I think I was cognizantly aware of a mentor. But there's been tons of people in my life who, in different seasons, have been able to just speak a truth and a wisdom that got me to the next level. Some of those people were seasonal, period. And then some of them have been in my life for a long time and kind of just float in and out. So yeah, I think it's essential to growth.
I do too. I think that when we find a mentor, and I have some sages in my life. When I use the word sages, they're just wise people who just whisper over my shoulder. They don't care whether I listen to them, don't listen to them. They're just going to give me their perspective. And whether it's father figure, which may be hard for some people to swallow, a mentor, a sage. I ran into a guy who's an experienced, successful career guy in a field I'm well aware of. And yet he just ran into one of my heroes, and he's like, I just want to spend every bit of time I can with this guy. I want to learn so much from him. And I'm like, he's the guy. That's the guy you want to learn from. It doesn't matter how old you are. There's guys that know shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
There's females that know some tricks to the trade that helps you get to where you're wanting to go. Why would you go it alone when you have all these other opportunities?
Mm-hmm.
So recently I had two situations that I wanted to bring up, Emily. One is a mutual friend of yours and mine that lives in Colorado. He likes to hunt. He went out with a guide the other day. Him and a friend went with a guide. And the guy starts talking about his life and talking about what's going on. And so our friend just, asked him some questions because he was dropping NFL players' names. He was dropping NBA players' names. So our buddy said, well, I hear you using these names and talking about this and talking about that. Who are you, and tell me what your deal is? And he said this. He said, you guys don't live close to here. If you did, there's a chance we would be friends. But we would only be friends if you're greatness. I don't hang out with anybody unless they're greatness. I
Wow.
specifically will not hang out with anybody who is not great and doing great things. Now, that can feel self-serving. That can feel a little, elitist. But dang, you only get one life to live. And if you're like, man, if you're not noteworthy, if you're not blowing it out of the water, if you're not trying to take a major mountain, I can't hang out with you. The bar for me is greatness. Now, I've never heard anybody say that before. Have you?
No, no, and I know there's people who are very conscious of who they surround themselves with, but never just come right out the gate and be like, "This is my bar," or like, "This is who I am and who I like to be around." Period. You're like, "Oh, okay, got it."
Don't you want to try to
So
be his
I,
friend?
yeah, of course, everybody wants to be like, "I've qualified."
Yeah,
Well, it depends on who he is. That's the thing. I was gonna say, does he fit my
yeah,
bar? No, but
that's
no,
it.
I think that's a really cool thing because it doesn't mean that you're not around people who are doing great because nobody's doing great and mighty and extravagant things all the time.
Sure.
But if you're like, it's one of my goals in life to just constantly be surrounded by people who are going after something.
Yep.
And yeah, there's both sides of a coin. Like, are you being elitist? Are you, being too self-serving or like a jerk? I'm sure there's some people who'd be like, how dare you say that? But then there's also the other side where it's like, this sounds like this guy is trying to constantly better himself. So he knows that if he is going to do that, he's probably got to be around some people who are going to challenge him.
Yep.
And so, and then then it takes the question even deeper. People who aren't always great are also teaching us things too. And we'll get to this in a bit, but like people who are failing also teach us great lessons.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, but
Well,
yeah, no,
but
that's very interesting.
I wonder if he says that as a boundary. If he does that up front to let everybody know, I cannot be everybody's friend. It's not you, it's me. But like, it made me think of something. When's the last time you intentionally put yourself in the presence of someone that you knew you'd be uncomfortable? You knew that you respected this person. You didn't know if you could carry the conversation, or when's the last time you put yourself in the presence of someone that you knew might just challenge the fire out of you?
It's been a few weeks, but I am very privileged in being around some like go-getter people because of where I work. So, the thing about it is it's taking the opportunity.
That's it.
Because they're around, it's me having to initiate and take the next step, or put myself into situations. So really, I mean, if I wanted to, it could be weekly.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it is intimidating sometimes. We have a imposter syndrome when we get
Yep.
around certain people and we're like, am I worthy of a conversation? Or like this person's
Worthy.
so busy. So yeah, I would say a few weeks ago I was somewhere with a work thing and there was somebody that I just really admire and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go shake hands and see what happens. So and it was great. They were lovely. And just to even make the connection was nice. So I try to do that as often as I can, honestly, because you never know.
You don't. And I think that, yeah, we're each responsible for our own careers, our own lives. And if we can put ourselves around people that stretch us. So let me tell you this story. I did it recently. I put myself in a place.
Okay.
So I went to Utah with two of my buddies, and we're looking at doing let's just call it a financial endeavor. And we were in a room with an annual conference of a bunch of different financial resources. And we agreed that there was only a couple general sessions. The rest of the sessions were all breakout sessions. And there was probably 6 to 8 breakout sessions at every hour. And there was three of us. We're like, look, we're all going to a different breakout session. We'll take great notes. We'll conquer as many breakouts as we can. We'll share our notes with one another. And we agreed to that. Except the very first breakout session was by the size of the organization. So the first one was $1 million or less. The next one was like 25 million or less. The next one was 100. The next was 250. The next was 500, and the next was $1 billion. So you have anywhere from like brand new startups at $1 million to $1 billion, right? And so they're like, okay, well, I guess we're all going to the kids' pool. We're all going to sit at the kids' table and go to the one under $1 million. Like, if you guys are going to the $1 million one, I'm going to the $1 billion one. I'm going down the hall. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because the big elephants are down the room and down the hall, and I want to know what they got to say. I mean, you two can handle the $1 million one, but I need to hear what the $1 billion people. So I actually had met the guy who was facilitating that meeting at some point. He didn't know who I was, but I reminded him. And I walked in and said, hey, this is who I am. And I said, obviously, we're not a $1 billion fund, but I'd love to just sit in and just listen in. He said, sure, we'd love to have you. He says, there's 4 of these $1 billion funds in America. They're all here today. They've all brought their team and their staff. So the room's going to be full, but there's only 4 of them. And just sit in there and listen. And Emily, I learned a life lesson that I never knew until that moment. I don't know how I didn't know this, but I didn't know it till that moment. When you sit yourself in a room full of 10s and don't even understand half of what they're talking about, you still learn more than sitting in a room full of 5s and you know everything they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You got to put yourself around people. They were dropping nuggets and wisdom and thoughts and ideas and processes. I was just taking notes going, this is the only room I need to be in today. It's in this room with these guys talking about these big things. And I think most people we're so trained to go to the class we're supposed to go to or hang out with the people we're supposed to. I mean, I would have loved for our friend to have looked at the guide that he had and said, well, I'm great, brother. I'm greatness. We're going to be buddies. You know what I'm saying? And I think most people, they discredit themselves. There's room at the table if we'll take it.
Yeah, yeah. No, and again, it goes back to the imposter syndrome, how you're like, oh, I don't deserve to sit at this table. I don't deserve to have my voice heard. And of course, that's rooted in fear and probably previous rejection and all this kind of stuff and
Sure.
identity. But if we can overcome that and say, hey, I belong here. There is
Yeah.
something, just like yourself. You're like, I've got something to learn. I want to be stretched. I want to be challenged. So I'm heading down the hallway. And I think that is so cool that you took this step. And it's also interesting that nobody else had that thought either.
Nope. No one. I was the only person in the room that did not belong in there,
Wild.
and nobody knew it because I felt like I belonged in there.
Mm-hmm.
And where else would you want to be? And I just think that there are mentors around us, sages around us, experts around us, experience around us.
Mm-hmm.
That if we would just lean in and just ask for a lunch, if we would just sit at their table and ask a couple questions, be respectful, man, they're so accommodating, they're so helpful. And so I just say that I would encourage us that there are people all around us that can help us on our journey if we'll simply ask for some help. And I think
Yeah.
if you don't have a mentor, my challenge for the rest of this year, not next year, not January goals, New Year's resolutions, I'm talking about this year, 2023, get you one and test drive that thing, because I guarantee you that you'll learn some things that will help you and will bless you either by their strengths or by their mistakes.
Mm-hmm. And it's so refreshing to walk away from those conversations, whether it was just honestly even like a half hour coffee date, because most of the time the people that I've been mentored by, like they're high capacity people, they're very
Yep.
busy. And
Yep.
the fact that they would give me their time was so precious. And I think that also taught me to honor people's time. And so when I had, half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it was with them, I was just like a sponge. And still am when I get to be able to have these one-on-one conversations with people. And I think as the person asking for this wisdom and guidance, like you come in with an open heart, you come in teachable, you come in ready to listen, and also be vulnerable, you're going to get something out of it. You're going to walk away, whether it's, dang, these are some great things, or, maybe that's not what I wanted, or the direction I wanted to go in, and that's okay. But I think having an open mind and open heart for just that initial conversation before the end of the year could be a game changer for somebody.
And I would even say find out where they're going to be and meet them somewhere really close to where they're going to be, so it takes
Mm-hmm.
them no travel time. I would prefer coffee over lunch because lunch can take forever. It could be bad service,
Yeah.
bad food. I would, and you buy their coffee. Just meet them somewhere near their office, buy their coffee, bring a notebook or your computer. Take some notes. I don't care if you
Mm-hmm.
say, I like this coffee, or this is a coffee house I need to come back to. They don't know what you're typing, but they need to see that you're paying attention, that you're engaged, that you're
Mm-hmm.
there to learn. People respect people that respect their time. And if you respect their
Mm-hmm.
time, people are going to be very open with you.
Yes. And when you walk up with humility,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing more frustrating than when somebody is like, okay, cool. I think I want to learn. Like, I think I want to grow, but I don't know. No, like, come prepared for the conversation. Like, again, that's honoring somebody's time. And so you need to come in with your humility and like your teachability turned all the way up. And even if you never go to coffee again, at least you were prepared to receive and you were prepared for this time, because you don't know who that next mentor could be that you show up and you're like, all right, I've learned how to sit and listen and be taught and ask good questions. I think that's another part of it. Show up with some good questions. Um, I mean, if you feel comfortable enough and they're like, hey, I'm an open book, because that's what I found. Most people are like, oh, you want to
Yep.
meet? Sure. Like, let's just talk. Like,
Yep.
I'm ready to talk. I'll share what I know. And like, you come ready to ask and to go there, because like I said, most of the time they're ready to talk. They're experts in whatever area that you're seeking after, most likely, or you wouldn't go after them. So come ready to engage and to have feedback and take the notes and all the things like that Nick even mentioned. So yeah, no, I think that is the best place to start.
Okay, one more thing before we get into the juiciness. So what's interesting is I had somebody ask me for coffee the other day, and they said, "I just need an hour of your time. Would you please give it to me?" And I was like, "Sure." I mean, people bless me. I want to bless other people. And so we were there for 60 minutes. They must have talked 52 to 53 of those 60 minutes. At the end, I was like, "Oh, you're not here to ask me questions or to get some wisdom. You're here so I'll know who you are." Huh. That's a tricky way of setting that up. We've not had coffee since. We will not have coffee ever again. If you're going to show up and spend 52 minutes of the 60 minutes talking about yourself, go get a therapist. You should have paid me for that session.
No, it's so true. Like, and I think this even goes back. So let's even, at the very beginning of the episode, what is it you're looking for? What is it you're actually looking for before you ask somebody to mentor you, or, a monthly coffee date? I need advice, blah, blah. Like, is there some other things that you may need to get sorted out in therapy or counseling or whatever? Because again, you need to honor that person's time. And like I said, most people that I've encountered are so willing to give it. They want to share what they've learned because they had an experience where somebody transformed their life or helped them make decisions to get them to the next level. So usually somebody's like, absolutely, I would be honored. So you have to meet them at that same place of honor and respect. But yeah, if you got to do a little introspection first. Am I looking for a mentor? Am I looking for a therapist?
That's it.
Just saying.
And yeah.
All
right, Em. So you and I agree we should have mentors and we should add people to our life. So the title of this podcast is Mentors: How to Get One and How to Break Up with One. So let's talk about how to break up with mentors. I've seen it done poorly, and only very seldomly do I see it done well. So, and I'm not the expert. This is just you and I processing out loud, talking about it. You and I have never heard anyone speak on this subject before. But I've been doing some introspection, and I've been thinking a little bit about this. And I'm going to put the glasses on, all right? The glasses are to read specifically 4 things. When do you need to break up with your mentor? Here's 4 clues. It may be time to break up with your mentor. And I welcome you, add as much as you want in. I'm just doing the groundwork to get you where we want to go.
Go for it.
Number 1.
Yes, go.
A role has developed where you no longer can grow. So think about this for a second, Em. The earliest mentors came through the apprenticeship programs. If you were a blacksmith in your town and a young buck wanted to be a blacksmith, they'd have to come work under the blacksmith, and the blacksmith would give them information, pass on wisdom, skill sets, but in exchange, the young buck had to do all the had to do the horseshoes for the horses. They had to do the grunt work. They had to do the low-hanging grunt work that the expert no longer wants to do anymore, the simple stuff, the redundant stuff. And so usually in a mentoring process, the mentor begins teaching the mentee the scope of what to do, and then starts turning over the easy projects, the projects they don't want to do. And it's a beneficial relationship. It's worth it to the mentor to get rid of some of that stuff and to have some help. It's worth the mentee to get the information. But what happens when a role develops where the mentee can no longer grow? They're stuck doing the shoes on the horses. Number 2, a role has developed where the mentee is being used for personal growth or success for the mentor. So the mentor is only keeping the mentee around because they're getting something from the mentee that benefits them but may not benefit the mentee any longer. Number 3, the mentor stifles your unique contribution instead of encouraging it. So instead of letting you bloom into doing the bigger projects, they want to keep you stifled doing the things that benefit them, but they don't want to see your growth. In fact, I've seen some mentors get really jealous when the mentee began to compete with the competency of the mentor, but that's the job of the mentor, is to raise up the mentee to be the best they can be, even if it's better than you.
Right.
And lastly, the mentor is jealous. This is when you might need to break up. This is not how to break up. This is when you might need to think about breaking up. The mentor is jealous of you adding other mentors to your life because they believe they're all you need. So I've seen a mentor confident and comfortable with their mentee until mentee said, hey, by the way, I've been thinking about adding a couple extra people to my life. And suddenly they get jealous and they're like, man, I'm Jesus Jr., right? I'm your everything. I brought you to the table. You got to stick with me and nobody else. Those are 4 circumstances where I would go red flag. It might be time for us to think about how do we peacefully, kindly, gratefully break up with our mentor. Any thoughts or ideas on that, Em?
Woo! What a great list. I feel like, Nick, you could write a whole blog post with all those 4 things. So, okay, I have many thoughts because I've seen all of this either personally or just observed it. So, number 1, that was you've kind of outgrown the mentorship, correct? Was that number 1?
Yep.
So I've personally experienced this and I don't mind sharing it. I think that's perfectly fine. I won't hurt anybody's feelings. So when I was walking through divorce, and then the whole year and a half after, I think it's probably a year and a half, I was in therapy. And I went through 3 therapists.
Wear them out, man. Wear them out.
I know. No, well, one of them was there through like just the absolute yucky garbage. And I feel like they got me as far as they could. And it was just it was feeling like we were, in our sessions, we were just going round and round. And so I just kind of like backed away. And then I say therapist, this other person was definitely more of a mentor relationship. And, it just faded out. They stopped calling me, I stopped calling them, and that was it. And it was kind of weird, but it is what it is. Third, then I found another therapist online, lived in California, knew nothing about me. It was great. We were able to have conversations that someone who hadn't known me before, we could dive into some stuff. She could say things to me that somebody else who maybe had a previous relationship with me could not. And then I basically graduated therapy. And by no means does that mean I'm whole perfect and am the expert on getting divorced at a young age. However, we got to a point where she was like, hey, I don't think we need to meet as consistently. And you are doing really well. Our last 6-7 weeks of conversation, it's good. There's not been, these huge obstacles. You've been very good at talking through things. And so I'm here when you need me. So that was cool. And I feel like that's kind of how some mentorship relationships also work. Some may just get you to a certain point and that's when it's been enough. Some may just fizzle out for whatever reasons. We won't get in the weeds about that. And then third, they've gotten you, you've almost graduated and they're going to keep cheering you on, supporting you. They're there if you need them. But they've essentially graduated you to the next step of your journey. And so, and again, I know I used they were therapy relationships, but obviously very similar in a way. So I think those, I've definitely experienced how those have kind of just come to an end. And 2 out of the 3 were very graciously done. And I think that was emotional intelligence thing and a good experience thing. So, but yeah, definitely seeing that from, all right, sometimes you've gotten what you needed and it's just time to move on. And that's okay. It doesn't mean the relationship with this person is over, but the role they're playing. Because you mentioned Team Nick.
Yep.
And sometimes that person they may transition to they're just a supporter and a cheerleader and a friend, not necessarily a mentor. And that's okay.
Yeah, and two things. Number one, I start therapy on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited about that. Having a new relationship to just vent and pour out stuff and work through and process. Number two is you discussed what it was like when a mentor came to conclusion or at least brought some closure to the relationship and said, hey, when I've seen it done well, usually it's the mentor that provokes it. And they usually said, you're ready. And you're like, no, I don't think I'm ready. And they're like, yeah, you're ready. And instead of seeing me once a week, why don't you see me once a month for a couple of months? I'm here, but it's time. You need to go on. I think it's healthiest when the mentor recognizes the progress in the mentee and gives them permission to transition the relationship to a new level. But I have seen times where the mentor was completely blind to any of that and was more focused on their needs getting met, their projects getting done, competing against the mentee, keeping the mentee close so that they could compete against them to feel better. And I've not seen it done well very often. So I started thinking about, if I was breaking up with a mentor, what are some thoughts and ideas I would have about breaking up with that mentor? So I've got three things. I'm going to lay them out for you, Em.
Yeah.
You jump on them, pounce on them. Hey, and I welcome any of our viewers. If you're listening in and you have to make this move, interact with us.
Yeah.
If you've learned some skills about how to do that, Emma and I will be happy to pass that on to other people. But this is a subject not many people are talking about. And I think more people need mentors. And if that's the case, more people are going to need to break up with them mentors at some point. So here's three things I was thinking about. Number one is adding a mentor and discuss why you needed to do this and what skill sets they add to your life. So one of the things I would do if I had a mentor is I'd go ahead and tell that mentor that I'm adding another one to see what their response would be. And I'd say, I'm specifically adding this mentor for these two skill sets. And maybe the mentor can say, well, that's not my skill sets. That makes sense. Or maybe they'll say, hey, that hurts my feelings a little bit because I think in one of those three areas I'm pretty good at. And then we can look back at them and say, oh, you've been good in 7 areas. But as I've grown and matured, I need some extra work in this area. And instead of firing the old mentor, what if we just added a new mentor and just let them know that, hey, I'm constantly adding new mentors and I'm not looking to you to get all my needs met. I think that that's a soft way of doing that to see how they feel. Number 2, restrict some access to your mentor for the needs that they've been getting met through your relationship and see if they're capable of adjustment. If you were able, like let's just say that they leaned on you to shoe all the horses, but you've outgrown shoeing the horses and one day they come to you and say, hey, we've got 20 more horses we need to get shoed. And you're like, you know what? I've already picked up a job in another town over and I'm going to be really busy. We're going to have to find somebody else to shoe the horses. And that might be a moment of crisis for the person that, hey, I've been relying on this one person. I've been using this one person. And now it's time for me to develop a bigger team of 2 or 3 people who can shoe the horses. And now we get to see, can they make the adjustment? Can they not make the adjustment? And then the last thing is, I like this one a lot because the best mentor-mentee relationships that end well, usually the mentor has a date in the future, like you're doing a 6-month apprenticeship and they celebrate, they have a graduation, they celebrate you. So if you're the mentee, why don't we do that to the mentor? Why don't we celebrate the mentor and graduate them on to somebody else? So have a celebration where you honor the mentor for all they've done and celebrate the end of a season and discuss what you hope the relationship will look like moving forward now that the graduation's over. So my thought would be that if we could go to our mentor and said, hey, I think I've been needing to add a couple extra people to my life. And I know you've been leaning on me to shoe the horses, but right now I feel like in order for me to reach my full potential, I need to go the next town over and really do some solid work. But I've got a couple guys in mind that can shoe the horses. And before I leave, man, I'd like to have a party for you. I'd like to celebrate what you've done in my life, the way you've mentored me. Obviously, I'm still going to need you as an advisor from time to time. But man, you've grown me. I can make a living off of, being an iron worker, being a blacksmith. And so I just want to throw a party, invite some of your friends and celebrate the job you've done and celebrate the end of this season. What do you think about that, Em? Would that work?
Wow, that would be awesome. Again, I don't even know if I've ever seen that done either. Because usually it's the mentee being celebrated, which is great.
Yeah.
They've put in work, they've made the commitment, and then usually they'll, say a little spiel like, yeah, well, thank you. I wouldn't have gotten here without this person. But it's not ever like the sole focus. And so I think that would be beautiful to kind of flip that on its head and say, oh, well, yes, I'm excited for myself and I know I put the work in and I'm happy, but it was because your contribution and I want to do something special for you. That's not just, a card. This is an actual celebration or like something that they would feel honored, because I know everybody receives that differently, but you've spent so much time with that person, so you would know what would really make them feel appreciated and honored for the contribution that they've made to your life and in that season. So I think that's awesome.
Well, another thing I'm thinking about, though, is if that person gets their value from mentoring someone else, and there's plenty of people out there that get their value from that, maybe another strategy is to say to the mentor, I want to have a party to celebrate what you've done in my life. And I'd like you to consider another mentee. I found a person that I think is strong and solid. They're a go-getter. They need you. And maybe you reload for them. And maybe this is an ongoing thing. But I think that a lot of times it's the mentee that feels the dysfunction. They feel it's not working anymore. They're the first ones to notice. And yet they just hang around and just keep doing the same old thing until it implodes. Instead of saying, hey, it's been a year and a half. I was thinking about in 2 months, why don't we do a celebration? And I think there's a new guy that I found that I think, would be good for you. And there's ways to transition that with honor and say, maybe even at the party you stand up and say, I could have never got to where I was without so-and-so. And, this is a celebration of, completing their mentorship. I'm always going to need them as a friend. I'm always going to need them as an advisor. But somebody else out there needs their time like I needed their time. There's a way to do this where they feel honored, appreciated, but you put a period at the end of the sentence so you can move on with your life.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And, a lot of people, it's easy to start something. It's hard to end something.
Oh, yes, it is.
Just because, well, maybe it's culturally, I don't know, but we're very rarely taught how to end and finish well or transition well. I know there's books and there's other podcasts and seminars on it, but it's not really something that I feel like is ingrained in our culture on how to end well. And to be able to do that in the most important way, and that's from a relationship. You can end different things and do it fine and do it well, but when it's another human being and in a relationship that's made, that has to be done well. That needs to be done in the most honoring, the most respectful, filled with the most gratitude, whatever you want that to look like, but it needs to be done well.
I agree 100%. And you and I both have read a powerful book that says, good cannot begin until bad ends. You've got to stop the bad. You've got to, and you're like, yeah, but what if, I can't find another mentor? There's an old saying that says, when the mentor is ready, the sage appears. And so at the end of the day, when the student is ready, the expert shows up, and we got to get rid of anything that's holding us back gracefully, honorably, and then move on into where we have bandwidth to receive from some new folks. And that's why we started with, the need for a mentor. But I've never seen anybody really talk about how to break up with your mentor. I think the best case scenario is the mentor recognizes the mentee is exasperated or is reached the end of the road and celebrates and graduates them. But if they don't, I think it's on the responsibility of the mentee to go ahead and say, this doesn't work for me. How can I now celebrate the sacrifice this person has made in my life, put a period there so now I can move on and continue with my journey? And again, not many people talk about it. I don't expect that this is the end-all conversation, but you and I like processing stuff out loud. So hopefully our listeners have some expert opinions that you can drop down there in the comments, and we will circle back to this at some time if you can give us some good stuff to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, just to remind you guys, I know some of you, I get a lot of DMs or like private messages because people are like, I can't share this publicly on a comment. And I'm like, hey, I get it. And we're never going to, also, we're not going to use your name. If we have used your name before, we probably asked. Well, yes, we have asked, or it's something flattering and you'd love for us to say it. But I know that this can be a sticky situation. This can be a little messy. And, anytime we're dealing with relationship dynamics, it can be. So if you do reach out and share, never feel like you have to use exact names, or if you do, we're not going to share those here. We'll just share the scenarios of anything to talk about or to share any wisdom that you pass on, because it will always be to help people get through something and process through it. So please feel comfortable to do that on our Facebook or Instagram or our email, letsprocessthatpodcast@gmail.com. So, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Again, we want your feedback. We want to hear from you because that's what helps us pick our topics and get this thing always moving forward, is because you guys give excellent feedback. Please, I'm going to now give a round of applause to the amazing people who also help make this podcast possible. And that is Caleb Honerkamp, who is the music producer who made this incredible music that you hear right now. All of our photography is done by Allison Frost from Before the Foundations Photography, and our ever patient, hardworking, save the day, as always, producer Adrian Vosh. We appreciate you guys. Follow along with us on socials. They're all linked below, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.